So good afternoon, good morning, good night, wherever you are. Some time of the day probably works. I'm David Solomon. In addition to being the Director of Research and Creative Activity at Christopher Newport University in Virginia, I'm the current chair of the Undergraduate Research Programs Division of CUR. And I want to welcome you to the second Undergraduate Research Programs Exchange. These 50-minute Zoom sessions are monthly facilitated exchanges of ideas and information on a variety of topics and issues related to undergraduate research programs. Sessions will be recorded, made available in the CUR community. These exchanges are not designed to be formal presentations, but instead will begin with very brief introductions by facilitators and then open for discussion. Please use the chat to post questions or comments. I'll do my best to keep up with them and read them aloud for response. Today's session addresses the issue of AI in undergraduate research proposals. We're fortunate to have three great colleagues facilitate this session, and I'll ask them each to introduce themselves, after which we'll begin with a short introduction of the topic. So, Amberly, why don't you introduce yourself? And whoops.
Absolutely. My name is
Yep.
Neese, and I am so fortunate to work in the College of Arts and Sciences at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University at the Prescott campus, and really passionate about this topic. So I'm excited to be here.
Great. Karen?
Hi, I'm Karen Rodriguez. I am the director of the Office of Undergraduate Research at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And we have been wrestling with the idea of generative AI and undergraduate research more largely for quite some time. So happy to be here and talk about this.
And Stefanie?
Hey everybody, I'm Stefanie Sevcik, formerly faculty director of undergraduate research at Georgia College, and now I teach writing and interdisciplinary studies, so writing and research methodologies at Mercer University. And I've been incorporating AI into my classes.
Thank you. Thank you. So, um, this is not what we're trying to address. We don't want to figure out whether this is the savior of mankind or the end of humanity. That's not our topic today. That might be a topic for a different discussion. We really just want to talk about the use of AI in undergraduate research proposals. But I do want to remind you that history has not been kind to new technologies. Many of you remember the 1960s when calculators were first introduced, and math teachers actually picketed outside high schools against the use of calculators in the classroom. Now that would be found rather absurd. The same thing was done with television. And now, of course, we're dealing with it with cell phones. So this is every new technology has sort of presented those kinds of challenges. And AI is really probably no different when it comes to that. One of the things that's really important that we remember is what this technology can't do yet. And the yet is a big part of this, right? Um, and we'll get into this in our discussions, I hope, but it largely can't do the creative part, which is really what the big concern is with a lot of people. And I'll let the facilitators address that. But as I say, our main focus today is to look at the role of AI in undergraduate research proposals and whether or not we establish a policy as an institution, as an office, regarding the use of AI when it comes to this and what people have done and kind of looking at some of the best practices that are already out there and some of the discussions. So my colleagues have introduced themselves already. I have prepared a nice slide with all of your names on it. So I'll leave it up there for a second just so you can, that can percolate. And then I'll pass it off to our first speaker, Amberly Neese.
Thank you so much. So I am excited about this, not because I have it all figured out, but because I had the opportunity to do an innovative teaching grant on our campus, and I integrated AI into the composition process. I've been teaching composition. This is my 23rd year. And I am a published author and very passionate about writing. And so when AI was first introduced, you can imagine it was like trying to put a cat in bathwater. I was highly resistant. And so I thought I could either fight the beast or I can take the beast to prom and invite AI into my classroom. And it was such a fabulous, I took all the pain points of writing and we integrated AI use in there. And it was so successful that I told my department head, I will never teach it any other way. And I learned a lot in the process. My students learned a lot in the process. And it was so successful that we've actually incorporated that in our writing labs, and even introduced the idea of starting some of our research projects with some AI help. So quickly, with ease, the benefits of incorporating that type of technology into our student research: extra efficiency. It helps tackle those pain points. Again, the big ones of starting a project and feeling confident in the process. Enhanced creativity. So obviously it can help us brainstorm, give us new ideas, give us a new perspective. I often tell my students, it's like that student that's in your small learning group that feels like they know it all and feels like they need to pontificate on all the things, even if they don't have any idea. And we go in with the dangers that AI pulls things out of her proverbial backside, her internet backside, in order to create ideas. That being said, there's still some great ideas that can happen when we do that. Extended data access. This is easy. Obviously, we have things such as abstracts that we can look at, but for some students to take large pieces of research and help kind of formulate it into smaller ideas to help them choose the correct research has been super helpful. And then there's everyday relevance. I'm equipping my students to be archaeologists, is what I say. Now, they're studying to be rocket scientists and pilots. They are not studying to be archaeologists. However, I want them to feel that they have the power to dig deep and maybe find some new things. And I'm sure even in archaeology, things like satellite imagery and LiDAR and drones and ground penetrating radar, for some might seem like cheating because you don't have to do all the digging. But for me, if we can take a shortcut and help us find the treasure, I think that that's where it should be for sure. So how do we practice this? So again, I'm a nerd about alliteration, and so I'm just going to lean into that. Practices for implementing AI at a C level in our research. Well, in integrating it into curriculum and encouraging those who teach, especially beginning composition classes, we introduce those tools in the research process early with simple applications like citations tools and grammar checks, things like that. Get them involved. If 61% of college students a year ago admitted to using ChatGPT, in full disclosure, we probably should teach them how to use it well and with integrity. So yes, the consideration and ethics, I loved the angel demon thing, but we talk about some of those moral, issues when it comes to that. And based on algorithms, the weaknesses in them and how to critically evaluate AI has been such great conversation in my classes and with research students for sure. We offer coaching and support for our students, so we train them to use these tools with care and with critical minds for sure, but also with integrity. And I think that is vitally important because, especially with most of the areas our students are going into, AI is going to be an integral part of their future. So we might as well teach them how to use it effectively in the present. And then finally, collaboration and feedback. Again, allowing the AI to be one of the tools in their toolbox, one of the arrows in their quiver, where that can really enhance teamwork and help those data-driven decisions be made.
Do you want to go to the next slide, David?
Yep. Sorry about that. I didn't unmute myself. I've got a cold, so I'm trying not to cough.
So following on what Amberly was talking about, I've concentrated on AI and the use of generative AI writing undergraduate research proposals. Our office has a research support grant that we offer for undergraduate students, 2 cycles every academic year. We had already been encountering some challenges in terms of what is considered primarily the students' writing. Often we would see, particularly in STEM, students would submit proposals that look like chunks of their PI's submission to the NSF or the NIH, for instance, had been incorporated into their proposal. So we've been having this discussion about how to ameliorate that challenge for quite some time, even before AI was introduced into the picture. And so we're kind of starting from 2 different points. One is considering what our campus policy is around the use of AI in writing, not just specific, not over the overarching question of research, but writing in particular. And also take into consideration, we have an apprenticeship program that works with novice researchers, and we walk them through the process of what does a research process look like, including this idea of the responsible conduct of research. So that's our starting point, and basically considering as an ethical researcher, what does that mean? So adhering to principles of transparency and accountability, et cetera, particularly in terms of writing, the idea that any AI or AI-assisted technology in the writing process should be to improve the language and readability of their paper and needs appropriate disclosure. So things like, and our writing center has a lot of information about the use of automated writing technologies. So that is something that we have now considered. I will admit, we had actually started from the point of absolute banning of use of AI in writing our research proposals, but I've been inched over a bit from the dark side to consider what it might actually be able to do. But the idea too is also, so not only this idea of responsible kind of research, but also our campus policy is if you're going to use it, make sure you're setting clear expectations on your syllabi and in terms of how it's being used in the classroom. So David, go to the next one. And so we very much use, the definition that CUR has produced in the last couple of years, a redefinition of what it means to do undergraduate research as a pedagogical process, and with an emphasis on that word process. And can you go to the next one? So considering what that is, again, that is, sort of thinking about, this is what we teach in our apprenticeship course, what's the iterative process of research, understanding concepts, methodologies, practices. You are not an expert yet. You actually need to understand your field and discipline. What's the background, the context in which questions are being raised, and the sorts of debates that are taking place. Things like producing a literature review. What does that mean? And also this idea that you have, as a researcher, a responsibility to a community of scholars. It's not just you. You're not existing as a researcher in a vacuum. And so what are those ethics of research and scholarly production? So we spent a lot of time talking about that. And so it has really informed where we ended up landing in terms of the research proposal as a teachable moment. Can you go to the next slide, David? So again, we start from the sort of place as an undergraduate researcher, or particularly a novice, they don't know what they don't know. So sort of, basically introducing them to the skills and expertise they're going to develop as researchers. Again, what that means to be responsible to a scholarly community. This idea of academic integrity, you're going to present your own work, not the work of others. What that means. Crediting your sources, not fabricating data, not knowingly spreading false information or altering evidence. Basically, any kind of academic dishonesty that would erode academic integrity and intellectual credibility. So for us, the idea is, because as part of the process, we're very insistent, I know like a lot of other institutions, on the place of the mentor in the research process for undergraduate researchers. And so I was actually influenced by David's sharing of his burden of proof for his syllabi. And so I'm thinking about the fact that for our students, when they submit a research grant proposal to our office, we do require mentors to scale on, in terms of whether something is doable on a point of, a 3-point scale of absolutely to maybe not so much. And we do require them to provide a letter of support. But we decided to change that up and said, so we're going to lay the burden of proof at the feet of the mentors, essentially, so that, and we're actually in the process of actually now we're writing up sort of the qualifications for our research support grant for the spring. And so we're going to lay this out, what it means to be an undergraduate researcher, this idea of what your responsibility is. And then again, specifically include the mentor in the process, where they will have had to read the students' and or final copy that they submit, So they're going to verify that it's primarily the student work. So that's where we are, and we will have this actually up on our website by January.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to pass it on to Stefanie, and I am aware that the screens are screwed up. I'm apologizing for the flipped PowerPoint business. I've got two monitors going in here, and I don't know what the heck's going on. So sorry about that. Stefanie.
No worries. Thanks, Karen and Amberly. I'm going to be very quick and just kind of mirror some of the things that you've already talked about. If you want to go to the next slide, please, David. So, like Amberly, I've been teaching with AI in my writing classes, and now I'm teaching a research methods class that's going to start tonight for interdisciplinary majors. And so I'm going to put an example. I think this will go in the chat. I don't think that it's on the slides that I submitted here to David in advance, but the actual, oh, it's too large. I'll figure out a different way. But anyways, for me, the emphasis really is on AI assistance versus content creation. Once students start creating content with AI, that's when things get really gnarly, and it's hard to control. But using AI as an assistant can be very powerful. And this is just to kind of echo some of what Amberly was talking about for brainstorming, for literature reviews. It's not necessarily great at providing real sources every time. So make sure, like, always emphasizing that you need to, double check everything that AI is helping you with. It's really good at helping with outlining and structuring and editing and language enhancement and formatting, and summarizing. So even for me in my own research, sometimes I will, put some things into Claude and then ask it to help me write a proposal because I've already written the paper, and writing the proposal kind of backwards is, I can do it. It just takes a lot of time, takes a lot more time than AI, and always kind of going back and checking AI's work. So some of the pitfalls include, being really targeted when prompting AI, so that it doesn't take over your voice and start doing content creation. It's not a replacement for your human brain. You need to always kind of be the human brain that's intervening with AI. So I ask students to screenshot conversations that they're having, and they're going to need to eventually, bear the burden of proof if anything comes up in terms of this is to AI and not enough you. And they need to verify everything because it does hallucinate a lot. And depending on what program you're using, you kind of always need to check for that. And to the next slide, this is just a Bloom's taxonomy revisited with AI. So again, just to kind of mirror everything, it's here to stay. And it's basically just us. It's up to us to figure out how to deal with it. And to be clear with our policies, that's another kind of overriding theme in my classes. This may be okay to use in my class for this purpose, but it may not be okay in Amberly's class for this same purpose. So always be clear on kind of those ethical conversations and be clear with expectations. So if you are having students submit proposals, make sure you're clear about the use of AI, because if it's not mentioned, then, students can make a lot more assumptions than just having a clear policy about it. And then I just have a list of some resources. If you want to get to my version of this presentation, you can go to tinyurl.com/AI proposals CUR. And I can put that in the chat just so you can access it. But there's endless resources out there. And on my version that you go to on here, you can see what my prompt is for having my students use AI with their research proposals.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to open it up to discussion here and questions that people might have. And feel free to share practices that you've already put into play that are working, as well as practices maybe that you've used that didn't work, so we can know what to avoid. Bueller?
Well, I'm not going to put it in the chat.
Good questions.
Oh, can I just ask a?
Sure, go ahead, Julie.
No. Yeah. Anyway, I can put it in the chat too. But okay. So back to the mentor, kind of verification. What if the mentor is giving the student their grant proposal to steal from? I just don't know. And we've had issues with this, and I don't know what to say. I mean, we have mentors sign things saying, yes, I know this student, I'm going to mentor them, but I'm not sure what to do in that case because you'd think they would know that that's not acceptable.
It's a great question.
Yeah, so I can at least give what we've been doing. So as I introduced at the beginning, this has been a question for us, for our students for the last couple of years. And we've offered proposal writing workshops to try to get at this question of primarily student writing. But we're still seeing it particularly in STEM students who will mirror what looks like chunks to us of a proposal that was turned into a granting agency. We do ask them for things like, what do you actually expect the impact to be? How what's the narrative, et cetera, like, things like that. So, we've been encouraging them to, for their voice. Still not worked out really great. Still chunks of proposals. You can see lots of pretty, graphs and charts and things. So, and we realize too, it's a question of equity because students in the humanities and arts, they don't have that same, they're usually creating their proposals from scratch. So it's been a conversation about bringing a mentor more firmly in beyond the letter of recommendation. And so what we're hoping to do in terms of, not just that, but also the use of AI at all is that we're going to be more specific with the mentors, when the research so we're going to have all that information available. We're going to widely disseminate it. This is the expectation that your students will be, even if they are working on a question that comes out of your work and a grant that you submitted, their proposal should be primarily their own writing. So what that's actually going to look like, I mean, ultimately it's like, it is kind of, if the mentor is going to do this, also that's sort of an influence on the student as well. But if there's some point too, it's like, what is the actual enforcement beyond here's what we would really like to do? But because we've also started even contacting mentors where it looked like the whole proposal was basically everything except the questions that the student was raising. We've actually notified both the student and the mentor that's like, this looks like it was essentially your proposal and we're not going to offer grant money for this. So we haven't had pushback on that yet. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, the four of us speaking today are all humanists. And so, Stefanie asked, is it common in STEM to have faculty actually submit proposals on behalf of their students? And I've dealt with that in my office over the years to the point where we now have a question in the application process. What percentage of the application did the student work on? What percentage did the faculty work on? And, I'll often have them contact me like, what percentages are you looking for? And it's like, I'm not looking for any. I'm looking to see that it was collaborative and that you work together, because that program that they're applying for is actually collaborative work. But I do think it is common, and I mean, STEM folks can address this better than I can, because I've seen it over the years where faculty will submit proposals on the behalf of the students. Julie's nodding. Yes.
I wouldn't say that extreme, but just kind of what I mentioned, just you can tell like this figure came out of a grant. You didn't do this. And how do you, and then supposedly the mentor saw the proposal before it was turned in. So sorry, I'm totally going off the track of AI.
No,
but
it's all part of the same
all
question.
of you are
So.
experts, so wanted to ask.
Well, I think this also goes back to that question of just being really explicit about what the expectations are, whether it be mentors contributing to proposals, AI contributing to proposals. There's just so much variation from faculty member to institution to, maybe they're in my class and they're being encouraged to use AI. All of these things, I feel like at the end of the day, the more explicit we can be in the submission process expectations, the better and the more equitable, because if you're in it, in engineering and it's expected that a lot of things will be done using AI versus if you're in the humanities and all your faculty are saying, don't ever touch AI. I mean, that's a question of equity too, and just being explicit about, making sure that we're all kind of that the students know what the parameters are of the assignment.
So
And
may I,
having frank discussions with them.
I was going to say, I'm on the panel, but can I ask the rest of the panel? In my
Absolutely.
department, we are very divided on the use of AI in our classroom. My question to you is, do you all have, I mean, we certainly have a policy. If you're going to use it, this is how you cite it, blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, we're almost split in my department as far as its use and its place in academia. Can you all tell me, what does it look like? What does the landscape look like in your area?
My university passed the buck to faculty and said has to have a policy. We're not going to tell you what that policy is. You can make up your own policy. And so as a result, we had one entire department come to faculty senate last month with a suggestion that the policy for the university be that you're not allowed to use it in anything. It was like, okay, that's not going to work. And I've been very frank with my students in the discussions about this and saying, this is a moving target. We still don't really understand it. And the policies are going to change. As I've said, my policy and my syllabi changed dramatically from last year. Last year, I told them, no, you can't use it at all. I said, but eventually, as this changes, I'm going to change my policy. And my policy this year actually now encourages them to use it, but encourages them to use it in a thoughtful way. And it does include that statement about the burden of proof being on them if I suspect that they have not written something.
Yeah,
Others?
in my research
Go ahead.
methods class, I just finished the syllabus just went live today, and in light of the ever-changing landscape, every week for every assignment, I'm telling them how to use AI. So not only is it, okay, it's expected that, okay, now that you have this tool, how can we harness some of the power? And actually having these open conversations makes it a lot easier to enforce in a certain kind of way, because you can talk to the students, look, this is clearly too much AI, bring it back, put your voice back in. And then it's easier, hopefully, moving for them to go to other classes and other contexts and be more open with those conversations about AI and really try to get to the bottom of what are the expectations. Can I use it? Should I not? Yeah.
Sarah from the land of the dead cicadas.
Those cicadas were awesome, David.
But they're
So
dead now.
I think my question is spurred by this discussion about students using their mentors' proposals, but it's sort of more in line with intellectual property and conversations with students about if you use your mentor's NIH proposal or a preliminary data set, or even some of your own creative writing in the humanities, and you use it in Gen AI, potentially that all goes up into the cloud and then is no longer proprietary. So I'm curious for the group, are there conversations with students and mentors about kind of this particular issue of concern, and how do you give students guidance about that? Like, you can't just use ChatGPT and not have all of that intellectual property go out for free use for everybody.
I mean, I've had that discussion with my students and talking about IP and the importance of, and it's really, quite honestly, I'm at a small school, so I'm not on an R1, and discussing with my students what it means. What is intellectual property? What does that mean? And giving them actual examples of situations that I've either had personally or I've had colleagues go through over the years where the materials were stolen. And there isn't much you can do about it when it comes down to it. And basically with the AI, as Sarah mentions, I mean, when you put something into ChatGPT, it's going to just, it's going out there. You're basically saying, here, take it. It's not mine anymore. And that's really problematic. Yeah, I mean, Anne says, they had a workshop on IP in the past year. I think a lot of campuses are starting to address that in more direct ways now. Finally giving the university lawyers something to go on rather than just reviewing contracts. But talking about these issues.
That's part of our responsibility as we're teaching them of sort of what it means to exist in higher ed too, right? Like, as we're demystifying this whole enterprise for them, one of the things that we're having to demystify is like, what does it mean to be scooped? And that doesn't necessarily mean someone stole your idea. They might have independently had that idea and just gotten it done quicker than you got it done, right? And why don't I want my grant out on the internet? Because it didn't get funded and I'm gonna try to send it somewhere else. And I don't, like they don't have any context for that, just like they don't understand tenure, just like they don't understand any of the other things that are, so unique to this environment. And so yeah, the more explicit we are, the better.
And we're also coming from a point of view of, we've had some, what I would classify as mini explosions about faculty research that was exposed because a student presented a poster. They were part of the faculty-led project to present a poster at our symposium when we used to archive them. And even though the mentors signed a document saying, I viewed this, it's okay to archive it, etc., it basically exposed the mentor's research, and partners, in particular, one was doing sort of a background check on, what else was out there. So we had even changed our policy in terms of presentation. So it's been informing. So there's a lot of things like that for us that have been percolating about this question of intellectual property. Also, students, what kinds of, what do they say in job interviews if they've been working on a faculty-led project? So these kinds of questions in terms of intellectual property and exposure. And I honestly think that, and it's interesting because right after this, I'm actually attending an ethical research and AI workshop. Our faculty actually considering when they're helping, they're writing proposals and with their students, and they're giving them, all this information basically kind of whole cloth. What is their exposure? I don't know. I honestly don't know that they've considered that at this point.
Ashley.
David, I was just reading your syllabus statement and it got me thinking, like, are you all running into this with students where they don't version save the way we version saved?
Right. I talked with
Right.
my
And so
students actually
they're
about that.
using live documents, they're collaborating, things are changing on the fly, right? And so are you also, in addition to telling them like onus is on you to have drafts, are you reminding them like, what drafts mean?
I
And
told
like
them you have to
versioning, it matters.
start saving your files in
Yeah.
draft numbers so that if you are called about this, you can present that as evidence. Because if
Yeah.
you're merely just overwriting the file, there's no history of the work that you've done. So yeah, I have actually addressed that with them all my
Interesting.
students
Okay.
directly.
Yeah.
Karen.
Yeah, I'm not teaching a course where we're doing this. We solicit proposals for one of our programs from any undergraduate at the university. A few come to our workshops. We suspect only a few bother to read the website before they submit the proposal. So for those of you who are not teaching this in a class or meeting with every student who's going to hand in a proposal, how do you get the information out about this? Like, in all honesty, I've just been sort of ignoring AI as if I pretended it didn't exist, it wouldn't be a problem. But we have to do something. But I think just putting a paragraph on our website is not going to be enough. How do I tell students I don't even know who they are what to
Good
do?
question. Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I mean, I get proposals from all over the students all over the
Right.
university. I
Yeah.
don't know most
I mean,
of them.
we 30,000, we have 28,000 possible undergrads who could turn in proposals. We don't get 28,000 proposals, thank God. But ideas, is anybody found a way to get the information out in an effective way to the masses that you are not sitting chatting with or handing a syllabus to?
Other than sending it to them as a text.
I mean, part of this
Probably
problem
the
is
effective
a
way.
larger.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say part of this is a larger issue of we need to rethink our curriculum. We need to rethink our general education requirements. This needs to be part of classes that all the students are getting. And another concern that I was going to raise is the environmental concern, right? That 6% of U.S. of electrical consumption is going to be put into these AI harvesting centers in the next year or something. So there are lots of really big concerns, but it's still moving ahead, right? I mean, it's still here. We're using it. Some students are getting the advantage of using it. Some are not. So to me, it seems like there's a lot of big questions that our institutions are going to have to ask and adapt to very quickly or get left behind.
And something else that you may consider, in many cases, there is a contract when you're submitting something where you can say, I agree to these particular things have been cited properly, all those kind of things, because it sounds like you're at a disadvantage that you don't have the eyeball to eyeball time with these students. So something like that might help. My colleague Anne is here, and she is a research rock star. Anne, do we have any things at Riddle that would help us tackle that question?
I think the we are just stepping into this as an undergraduate research office. So we had all our students who submit proposals have to meet with our writing center. And Amberly did do a training session with our writing center tutors to help in that review process. I think I will probably adopt what Goldwater Scholarships has now included in theirs, which is a statement about use of AI. For our next cycle. And so that's sort of where we are now. But I think having our writing center tutors have training is helping us. But we do get to meet in orientation meetings with all the teams moving forward. And so we're able to discuss it there.
Anne?
So, David, I think similarly, our university has not come out with a blanket policy, nor do I expect it to, but I'm just curious to dive in a little bit more about your syllabus statement, and to ask whether you think the threat of that has been sufficient to prevent students from needing to present that burden. And the reason I ask is because our indirect approach, not a statement from the university, has been assume everyone's using it. Assume everyone's using it. And also, but basically because our Center for Community Standards says it's impossible for us to prove one way or the other, right?
Right.
And so I'm curious whether you've had students present to you and maybe if they haven't, to imagine what would satisfy you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I've had students now who have included a statement in their pieces that say, I used ChatGPT to do the lit review for this paper. That's what I'm asking them to do, is give me that indication. The student I have coming in actually in 20 minutes is a student who I'm challenging and saying, I think ChatGPT wrote your paper. A lot of this just doesn't sound like you, it sounds like ChatGPT. And so she's going to have to explain to me how it isn't. I've told them up front, the burden of proof is on them. What would convince me? Part of it would be if and I've instructed them to do this, to save drafts, to save, go back to the paper trail, right, of the work that you did and show me the work that you did, to show me that this was yours. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, the plagiarism detectors are useless when it comes to this. And even when one comes out and says, oh, we're the gold standard, we figured it out, wait 5 minutes, and that's no longer the case. So, it is something, I mean, and I think Stefanie, you and I are maybe on the same page with this. My initial reaction to it was, this is horrible. It can't be used. It shouldn't be used. And so last year, my approach was, you cannot use it. And after thinking about it and reading about it and meeting with people, including my CUR colleagues in Maryland in June, and talking about this, I spent the summer refashioning my statement, and it's a page-long statement I'm willing to share with anybody. I posted the end of it there that talks about the burden of proof. And I mean, so far it's working. But what is so far? I mean, that's the problem with this, right? We were discussing this a couple of days ago, and the fact of the matter is that the technology moves very quickly. And, in the humanities, we don't move that fast. We like to sit and think and contemplate and reflect, and that takes time. And so, it's interesting that the technology, we can do it. Humanities responds with, yeah, but should we? And in many cases, the toothpaste's already out of the tube. So there's not much, nobody's waiting for us to come up with the answer. Any other insights on this or questions? Anne is posting supposedly the URL or the statement from Goldwater on AI here in the chat. And I think that would be helpful. I mean, I think that the most important thing that comes out of this is you got to draw up a policy. That and to use AI in this work without it really breaching intellectual property issues and crossing over into plagiarism. And that's going to be the sweet spot that we have to find. So there, Anne has posted the question, the yes or no question, huh? Was an AI tool used to prepare any part of this application?
It's yes or no, but then if you say yes, you have
To
to
elaborate.
answer how it
Yeah,
was used.
yeah. And that's pretty much what I've been asking my students to do, is to include a statement at the end of the paper that says, ChatGPT was used in the editing of this paper. ChatGPT was used in the formatting. It was used in the outline. And what did you do? What did you use it for?
And I mean, this goes back to that question of being clear and precise with what the rules are and expectations, and also just getting out there and all of us and all of our colleagues using it. Like, try it out, because you will see that, I mean, I'm writing my proposals with it. I'm writing my syllabi with it. It's different, obviously, when you already know how to do those things and you can guide it better and prompt it better than a student. But this is the world that we're living in. So it's just really, it's a fantastic tool, and I would encourage everyone to use Claude AI and just play around with it themselves for some things that you don't want to write. Your annual reviews, these are great things to let AI help you with.
And notice the things also that it gets wrong, because that's also really important to convey to your students. I mean, somebody mentioned earlier, the hallucination thing, right? I mean, it does hallucinate. And my first encounter with it was not this past summer, but a year ago, when I was working with some high school teachers job, and they were just flipping out about AI. These were all English teachers. And I said, well, let's put it up on the screen and look at ChatGPT and let's see what it can do. And so I put it up on the screen and I said, well, give me a text that you teach. And they said, To Kill a Mockingbird. I said, okay, great. And I put in, give me 5 sources for To Kill a Mockingbird. And it gave me 5 sources in MLA format. And everybody went, ooh, ah. And within about 2 minutes, somebody in the back of the room noticed and said, wait a minute, those aren't real. It was made up, because it makes up the response if it can't come up with one. It wants to make you happy.
Totally. On to Stefanie's point, be aware that the paid version of Claude, I can actually put in my work. I can introduce Claude to my personal writing, and it can start writing in my tone. So be the spidey senses that we get, where we say to the student, boy, this does not sound like you're writing. For the record, AI is at a place where it can mimic my tone, which is befuddling, bemusing, and frankly frustrating.
Horrifying.
Yeah, it is. It's 100% horrifying.
Anne, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
That's totally fine. I guess, I'm having a somewhat more existential crisis about this than anything else, just because I think, here we are presented with a tool that, I fundamentally believe has utility. What I worry about is the degradation of the relationship between mentor and mentee, educator and student, because, we can't prove it one way or the other. And somehow our students have caught the bug that faster is always better, and more efficient is always better. And, so when we ask them to sign this thing saying like, did you use it? Yes or no? And they are trained to believe that there are going to be punitive outcomes if they admit to it. or they use it in qualified way, or frankly, that we can't tell one way or the other, right? That we're encouraging the the erosion of the sort of contract, the social contract that we've all undertaken in this pedagogical process that we've entered into. And so I just don't know, like, and it really troubles me to hear you say that like a faculty mentor is signing off. And I don't know, right? Whether it's like I just haven't paid close enough attention and I'm too busy and I just sign whatever's put in front of me, or if it's like, yeah, this is a stupid rule, I just disregard it. And then the students are picking up on that, and then we're left sort of scrambling, and again, those of us who aren't in a class, right, we don't have the luxury of being able to see voice develop over a period of time. So if we just get a snapshot of a proposal, like, particularly in that research, so in a non-course based research setting, you know, I'm left sort of wanting to blow it all up and start over again. Which
Yeah.
So I'm just offering something, and also kind of where we landed, but also our campus's policy was looking at policies of journal and professional societies in terms of generative AI. And so, the fact that if you are using Gen AI, so for instance, Elsevier, they're pretty specific. And so, the idea is that you can only use it to improve language and readability of the paper, and you have to, disclose appropriately. Our campus has taken that a bit, beyond that too, in our writing center for students, but also when it comes to submissions, getting everybody on the same page. The idea is that you have to disclose it. You have to, the summary of how and why you used it. Really clearly, what research tasks did you ask it to perform? Full citations of the generative AI tools you used, the prompts you gave. UIUC's organizational best practices also said you have to use specific vendors that they've approved for terms of, meets our terms of service. And, that basically, anybody who's using it has to adhere to the campus's, best practices in terms of ethical conduct of research. So that's kind of where we're coming from too, and talking to the students about producing proposals, is this is a campus-wide understanding of what it means to conduct research in a responsible manner, including writing. And so as a neophyte researcher, not only do you need to understand the parameters of what it means to write a literature review, for instance, on your own, what that looks like in your field before you start using AI for content, but our campus is very specific about, how you can actually use AI. So even though it leaves how it might look in the class for faculty to use it one way or another, the campus is actually pretty, has come out, even as it's evolving, it's been very specific about responsible conduct of research and writing when it comes to generative AI.
I honestly think that, I mean, this is, as Anna's pointing out in the chat, like whack-a-mole using AI for all of our writing. And it's going to be, I mean, I just feel like all of the paradigms are going to shift, and they're starting to move in that direction already. And we really, my personal view has always been, I want to get ahead of this. Like, I am in the humanities. We've already been in crisis. We've been in crisis for decades. Let's get ahead of this. Let's actually help students use it in a way that we approve of, that can be ethically used, and kind of help bring the humanities back in a way too. Because for me in my classes, at least, I'm always trying to bring the human back. Like, okay, now one another for StoryCorps. It's balancing that we have to use AI for certain things, but nothing will take away that human dimension, and making sure to have mentoring meetings with every single student I have, because that is, kind of bringing back that human dimension. But this is obviously a thing that, we're going to need to figure it out and it's here.
Yeah. I mean, I think Anne's, analogy to whack-a-mole, is certainly an accurate one. Yeah, I mean, Joanne mentions, the concern being that students are losing out on how to do critical skills unassisted. And I think that's a big concern with this. And I don't have an answer to that. I wish I did. I think the important thing is for us to continue having this discussion amongst ourselves and also with our students, because this is their future. It's not going away. And so, how do we figure out, just as they did with the calculators in the 60s, instead of picketing outside the school and saying we can't use it, keep it out of the classroom, how can we best use it? I think that's the cell phones are the same thing. Just banning cell phones from the classroom is really kind of foolhardy in a world that we live in today. But I'm going to wrap us up here. We're at the end of our 50 minutes. I want to thank everybody for participating in today's URP Exchange. Sincere thanks to our terrific facilitators. Thank you to the three of you. Thanks to CUR and especially Todd Wagner for his tech support. Our next exchange will be Monday, November 18th at noon Eastern, when we're going to discuss best practices in undergraduate research websites with the winners of the 2024 URP website competition. We'll post the information with a link to the CUR community very soon, and I hope you'll join us again then. And I wish you all a good AI-free day.